every single vote cast in an election matters. Every single vote. And what I like to ask people who say, hey, it may not matter, if our votes did not matter, if it didn't matter us going to the polls, why do so many people out there fight so hard to keep us from doing it? Why did our ancestors fight, bleed, and die for the right to vote? Why did they have to face hoses and dogs and people intimidating them and poll taxes and all these other things if it did not matter? This year, today, why do we face an administration who's trying to keep us from voting if they knew that they're deathly afraid of our communities voting them out of office? Because they know when we come together, when we voice our values, we fight for our future and our families, there's nothing we can't do together. We know we can put people in office like Qasim Rashid who represent compassion, humility, respect, intelligence, a respect for science, and so much more that we actually believe in. So we have, 52 days? 51? 52. 52 days to make sure we get as many of our friends and family to the polls, whether that's voting early in person, voting by mail, or even on election day. But we have to make sure that every single person we know knows that this election matters more than most of the other ones in our lifetime. So are you all ready to get to the polls? Yeah. Are you all ready to get your friends and family to vote? Yeah. Are you ready to fight for a future that we can all be proud of? Yeah. Now let's get out there. Thank you very much.
But we thank you for being in the Potomac area. And the biggest thing is it is important for us to vote. We are about change. Are you about making a change? Yeah. And so because we all are here to make a change and to get Qasim and the Democratic ticket voted in, we want to make a difference. And in making a difference, we got to vote. You do matter, we matter, our kids matter. So we have to make a voice for ourselves. We have to stand to make the change. So as we look at all the things that Supervisor Bodie just pointed out and Supervisor Franklin, let's take heed to that. Let's look at what's important and what needs to occur. So again, are you ready to vote? Yeah. I say let's make a difference. All right.
And it really is. It's been a long 3.5 years. Too long. And, I'm here to support Qasim Rashid today because I know that doing that is going to make a difference in Congress. I believe that getting people who actually care about other people in Congress and representing the people that they're supposed to represent makes a difference in our lives on a daily basis, and they can vote for things that we want them to vote for. So I'm here supporting Qasim, but I'm also here to say, obviously the people here probably might vote, but maybe someone who doesn't vote on a normal basis or has gotten discouraged and doesn't necessarily want to vote. If you can bring that person in and get them to vote also, that's 2 votes in the right direction. And so I would just challenge everybody today, do you know somebody who doesn't want to vote or isn't planning to? Go out and find them and get them to vote. This is, I believe, the most important election in my lifetime. And it feels like everyone always says that every time, but I really do believe it's true. Come November 3rd, 4th, until 3rd. And I have faith, I have hope, and I think it's going to end well. That said, I'd love to see Qasim in there also. So if anybody's in the CD1, please get out and vote for him. And in the county, we have a lot of different ways to vote. We normally have 3 in-person absentee places. This year, we're having 3, but right before the election, there are going to be 8. Makes it easy to vote. I believe we're going to have drop boxes coming. The state legislature just approved drop boxes, so if you get an absentee ballot at home, you can put it in the drop box. There are a lot of ways to vote these days, and they're taking away our excuses. And so I would just hope that everybody you get them to vote. I'll also put a plug in for the census. I've seen 2 people fill out the census today who hadn't filled it out already. Thank you for remain nameless over there clapping. And the census is really important. It's the way we count when we get money from the federal government for transportation, healthcare, schools. The census is one of the things that's going to drive how much money we get from the federal government for the next 10 years. So, I implore you, if you haven't filled out the census, please do so today. Get people to fill out the census. It actually makes a tangible difference in our everyday lives. So I'm grateful to be here to support Qasim, And I'm always glad to be down in Dumfries, and I think it's a great day. It's not too hot. This is great for me. So glad to be here. Thank you.
One of you, I attach myself to every comment that was said before me. I'm not gonna repeat some of the same stuff. You know that when we vote, come on now, when we vote, when we vote, no doubt about it. So it's not only about you voting, but it's about you picking up somebody and making sure they vote. One of the things that you got to know is Dumfries has an early voting location. You can come here and you can vote early. I think that voting is starting next week, right? The 13th. The 18th. So yeah, you can vote early right here. Let's make sure that we're letting our neighbors know that when voting happens, that they can do it. It's important. You don't know what's at stake. We all know what's at stake in this election and what we got to do and what we got to change. The very state of our democracy is on the ballot in this election, and what we stand for and what we built to have some levels of controls and checks and balances. We're on the verge of having a dictatorship if we don't kind of get out there and vote. And this isn't just about us collectively as elected officials, but we're supposed to represent the collective voice of the people and do what the people want. And that's what we're elected to do. And so that's why it's important to continue for you not only to get engaged, but you to get other people engaged. Because this takes a community effort. UNITY, us having common unity together, coming together. So listen, go out, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. And again, I'm grateful that the 1st Congressional District is going to be represented for the first time going into the 2021 session with a Democrat in that seat, because folks are going to get out there and they're going to vote. So let's get out there, let's change these seats, and let's go fight and win. God bless you. I love each and every one of you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Now, typically we hear souls to the polls, but this year we want to make sure that everybody gets out and votes early. We have to make sure you're going in-person absentee, or you're getting those ballots and putting them in the mailbox or putting them in the drop box. It is extremely important that we mobilize Lottie Dottie and everybody to get out and vote before the actual voting day. Now, this is so key. I think many people don't understand the importance of the election for the 1st Congressional District. Now, let me just share some information with you. A lot of people, this is a good friend of mine, so I can talk about it like this. A lot of people are focusing a lot of attention on the 5th Congressional District, where Dr. Cameron Webb is running. That's great, that's cool. But the more flippable district is the 1st. We have more data here to flip the 1st than we can in the 5th. Now, this is also important. Lucy McBath down in Georgia flipped a Republican district that was leaning 8+ points Republican. Guess how many points the 1st Congressional District is? 8+ points Republican. That means if Lucy McBath can do it, Qasim can do it. And I bet you Qasim will do it. And so it's important for us to realize we cannot sit on the sidelines this time. This is not the opportunity to say, I'll wait next 4 years. This is not the opportunity to say, oh, I don't like who we have, so I'll wait it out. We need you to show up. And it's important that you show up and show up often. In Virginia, we have elections every single year. Don't wait this year. Show up this year and show up again next year as well. And so we have the opportunity not just to hold the House, take the White House, but also flip the Senate. And it requires you to come out and do it. This means our democracy is on the ballot, and we need you to be the heroes to save the day, to restore our democracy back to the people of the United States of America. And so I'm excited to be here with you all. There's so much that we can talk about. There's so much we can push. But Qasim is here. He'll talk with you. I'm here. Any one of the elected officials, if you've already seen us, wave your hand if you're an elected official. You can come talk to us if we have any issues or any concerns. I'm glad to be here. Let's vote, let's win, and let's take it back. God bless you.
Qasim Rashid. Because this country and this Commonwealth has failed to fulfill its promises. Justice, equality, fairness has been laid to the side. While COVID-19 has ravished our communities, we're seeing a disparate impact amongst the brown and black communities with this recession more akin to the Great Depression. And we can always talk about the racial reckoning that's happening in our communities. So that is the status of the day. And there are too many politicians making false promises and not showing up for us when it matters. Not voting our interests when it matters. Not coming to our community and hearing from the people when it matters. And so we're all here today to say, now is our time. We've had enough. We have hit the streets and hit the pavement, and now we're gonna hit the ballot box, because that's where our voice matters, and that's where we will be heard. I wanna make sure everyone here understands how significant and consequential this election is. Because I don't know about you, but I can't do 4 more minutes, let alone 4 more years of Trump. There is a federal failure that's happening right now, and over 200,000 people will soon perish from this earth needlessly because of someone's incompetence, because someone's ineptness, because of someone's deceptiveness. And that's why we have to have a principled leader in this congressional seat who will speak truth to power, who will ensure our interests are represented. And again, that is why I'm here. I don't support anybody. I don't show up and put my name to any candidate. But Qasim Rashid is someone that I believe in. He is someone who has dedicated his life to service for domestic and sexual assault victims, working with the interfaith community to make sure that our interests are put to the forefront. And now he's going to take the fight to Washington, D.C. So it's really simple. Qasim has shown up for us. He wants to represent all of us. He will stand for all of us. The question is, will you stand with him? So if you have given to his campaign, give more. Give it till it feels good. Give it to, we know he's going to win, because that's what it takes to communicate with the voters, to get them out on November 3rd. People think that we don't care. They think we won't show up. They think we don't know what's happening, but we're gonna show them something else. That's right. And now it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce my friend, the warrior for the congressional seat, Qasim Rashid.
Thank you, Delegate Jeffrey California. Thank you to all the folks who spoke. You know, they say you can judge a person by the company they keep. I feel like I'm in pretty good company, right? Yeah. Round of applause for them, please. My name is Qasim Rashid. I am the 2020 Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress here in the 1st District of Virginia. I want to tell you 2 stories today. One story is my own personal story, and the second story is about a gentleman named Robert Smalls. Who here has heard of Robert Smalls? All right, good. Y'all are gonna enjoy this story. My story is that of an immigrant to this country. My family left a country, Pakistan, that persecutes us for our faith, to pursue what this country promises, that promise of equal justice under the law. It really came down to our parents rejecting what they were told we were supposed to be and wanting their children to aspire to achieve what we were meant to be. And being teachers, it would have been easy for us to rely on them, but they wanted us to be out in the forefront. Anyone here who's been a teacher, who has had the blessing of having a good teacher, knows that your teachers can make or break you, and a good teacher will make you. And so for us, the underlying message when we arrived in the United States, in Virginia, no less, was your job, your purpose here is to serve humanity. It's your mission, it's your goal, it's why you exist. And they used a really strong word that at the time felt strong, but the older I get, the more I realize how important it is. They said, if you're not serving humanity in everything you do, you're wasting your life. And as we look around at the struggle of so many around us, we begin to understand just how critical it is that we center service to humanity at the forefront. Now, it would be inaccurate for me to stand here and say that we lived happily ever after. No, we struggled. When my brother enlisted in the United States Marines, we were a military family like 1 in 5 military families in Virginia living off of food stamps, living in Section 8 housing to make sure we could get by. I've been working since I was 15 years old to make sure we could make ends meet. And I don't share that to garner sympathy. I share that because now, 30 years later, the situation is even worse than it was 30 years ago. That's a narrative that we've allowed to happen that we can push back on. And so growing up, as I began to understand the beauty of this country, I recognized that I can't truly understand where we're going unless I first understood where this country came from. And I began to research the civil rights icons and heroes. Many of them you all already know: Dr. King, Malcolm X, Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks, Ruby Bridges. But then there's ones that we don't necessarily know. Folks who refused to accept what they were told they were supposed to be, to rise up to achieve what they knew they were meant to be. One of them was a young man named Robert Smalls, born into slavery. At 23, he decided, I'm going to rise up and achieve what I'm meant to achieve. So during the Civil War, Mr. Robert Smalls commandeered a Confederate vessel, and he dressed himself up as a Confederate captain. And he learned very quickly the Confederate Signal Code Book. And he took that Confederate vessel out of Confederate waters and joined the Union Army. But he didn't stop there. He then joined the Army and fought against the Confederacy and helped win the Civil War. But he didn't stop there. He then went on to run for Congress as was one of the first Black Americans elected to U.S. Congress. This was the quintessential story of a man who rejected the status quo, rejected what he was told he was supposed to be, and rose up to achieve what he was meant to be. And so learning these lessons growing up, seeing these icons growing up, and combining it with a message from my parents about this aspect of service to humanity to be at the core, the center of what you do. The next question for me came, how am I going to exemplify that? And that actually came with my wife, Aisha, who encouraged me to get into law school. And the quick side story is I was ready to apply for an MBA program. She's reading my application essays and she goes, "This is the worst piece of trash I've ever read in my entire life." And so I said, all right, well, what do you think I should do? And she said, I think you should go to law school. And I said, nah, I don't know if law school is right for me. And she goes, no, that wasn't a suggestion. You're going to law school. And so I got accepted at a phenomenal program at the University of Richmond School of Law. And that's really where my fire for human rights law took off. Started working pro bono at the Virginia Poverty Law Center, their Office of Domestic and Sexual Violence, supporting DV survivors. Started working as a prison chaplain in our state prison system. Started working on international religious freedom, fighting for persecuted Jews and Christians and atheists around the world. Because freedom of conscience is a fundamental human right. And we must fight to protect that worldwide and here at home. And so, as a human rights lawyer, I began to understand two things that ultimately helped me arrive to this spot right here. First thing I understood was that these issues that plague us, like poverty, domestic violence, addiction, mental illness, they don't know a political party. They don't know a racial demographic. They don't know a gender. These are issues that impact all of us. And yes, because we have broken systems, they harm some of us more than others. But the fact is that as human beings, these issues plague all of us. And we're told we're supposed to accept them as they are because that's just the way things are. So the first thing I learned was, because these things impact all of us, we have to remember we are the United States and we need to work together to change these systemic injustices. But that's where the second issue came up. I began to understand, and for those who are advocates out there, those who are lawyers or mental health counselors or teachers, you begin to understand no matter what you do in advocacy, there are fundamentally unjust systems out there and fundamentally broken systems out there perpetuating the poverty, perpetuating the criminalization of addiction, perpetuating and enabling domestic violence. And until we get people into office dedicated to serving the people, we the people, these systems will continue. As long as we continue to think that things are the way they are and out of our control, then we will fall into that trap of believing that this is what we're supposed to be. But I ask you to look at the example of people like Robert Smalls, who rejected the status quo and rose up to achieve what we were meant to be. This run for me is really less about Republican versus Democrat. It's about who's fighting for working families, who's fighting for marginalized communities versus who wants to give billionaires another tax cut, corporations another seat at the table. We are at a dire place in our country right now where nearly 200,000 of our neighbors have died and we see no end in sight. And a positive result seems impossible. So I close with these words as a reminder that this election is not about me, it's not about any one of us. It's a referendum on the kind of country we want. Do we want a country that perpetuates an injustice or a country that achieves what our framers called us to achieve, a form of that more perfect union? And I'm reminded of the words of the great James Baldwin when he was asked about these injustices and how we would overcome them. And he said, I know that which I ask of you seems impossible. I know it seems impossible. But when you look at the spectacle of human history in general and of Black history in particular, you will find that we have been asked to achieve nothing less than the impossible, and we have achieved it anyway.
All right, that's right, that's right, that's right.
My friends, it's only impossible until it happens, and then it was inevitable. So my ask of you is these next 52 days, let's go out, let's achieve the impossible, let's make it the inevitable, and let's make our country that more perfect union that our forefathers aspired it would be. Thank you. God bless you guys. Let's go out and win this thing. 100 deaths from COVID-19. They had 0. We should think about that. And then finally, if anyone's paid any attention to what's happening in our country right now, climate change is wreaking havoc on our nation. 3 of the top most poor air quality cities in the world right now are US cities. Seattle, Los Angeles, and I think San Francisco. I can't remember the third one. But what we're seeing happen right now is a result of climate change. And if we don't act quickly and immediately to reverse this and bring about an economy and an environmental policy that both advances environmental justice and protects our economic future, then we've seen the devastation of this pandemic. It's already cost us $8 trillion. That's going to seem like a drop in the bucket when the impacts of climate change become even more violent than they are right now. So that's kind of where my thought process is: get ahead of this virus, get economic security, protect our healthcare, and combat this existential threat of climate change. Virginia, this is one of the examples I talk about that when you're an advocate. I was a prison chaplain for 4 years. You begin to realize that you can be an advocate as much as you want. There are fundamentally unjust systems. Now, I don't call the criminal justice system a broken system. A broken system would indicate that it was meant to uphold a sense of fairness and justice, but it's just broken. This system was designed. The 13th Amendment didn't abolish slavery, it relegated it to the prison system. So it's unfortunately working the way it was intended to uphold prison slavery. There's a couple of things I would do. One is we need to protect voting rights. And the reason why this is so critical is because this felon disenfranchisement model that we have adopted that had nothing to do with the founding of our country, that didn't even come into play until 60, 70 years after our nation was established. What this has done is allow a class system to develop, where if you're a government that maybe doesn't want certain people to have a voice, guess what? You just throw them in prison and they don't have a voice. So I believe, and I've called not only for the re-enfranchisement of those who are incarcerated, but that those who are incarcerated should not have their voting rights taken away in the first place. The only exception I can think of is if somebody commits actual voting fraud or election fraud. That's a different conversation. But just because somebody got a DUI or somebody committed a felony, that should not take away their voting rights. That's one. Two, we need to have a comprehensive conversation on everything from stop and frisk policies and getting rid of them, reforming our actual sentencing requirements, and Delegate Jennifer Carroll Hoy can talk about this and more because she's worked in this space a lot more than I have, and ensuring that we have a system built on rehabilitation and reform to decrease recidivism, not the current model of revenge and retribution. One of the data points that always leaves me shaken is that 20 years ago, we spent about the same per inmate as we did per student. Now we're spending nearly 3 times per inmate as we are per student. And part of that also, and I'll close with this because this is a much longer conversation, and we've done some great forums on this, is ending the drug war. The drug war has been a complete failure. We charge and arrest Black and Hispanic Americans at a rate of 6 to 9 times that of the general public. And then they get 15 to 20% longer sentencing requirements. It doesn't make us any safer. It doesn't make our law enforcement any safer. It doesn't make our prisons any safer. All it does is create a broader divide. These are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about in this space. Yes.
What is the strategy to win on November 3rd, Qasim?
The strategy to win on November 3rd. Gotta drink of water first. I think that's the fundamental question of the hour. In the past, in this district, the only way we would have won is by getting crossover voters. People who historically vote Republican and decide that they're tired of their party and they're gonna vote Democrat. We're getting a lot of those right now. But the data that we've seen and the evidence that we've seen shows something very powerful. And that is that the votes are already there on people who already vote for progressive policies, who already vote as Democrats. But I want to emphasize that this is going to come down to the work each and every single one of us do these next 52 days. That's fundamentally it. You know, if we are able to pull out the kind of voter turnout we saw in 2008, 2012, it's a foregone conclusion we're going to win this thing. But think about the power that you have. That if you are able to reach out to your networks and to your communities and let them know that you don't just have somebody to vote against, but you have someone to vote for. Someone who's dedicated their life working on human rights issues and on the front lines, in the trenches. Get involved and get engaged. Someone who doesn't take a single penny from corporate, from billionaire corporations, but is 100% funded by we the people. I'm proud to say, Delegate, that we have had more donors to our campaign this year alone than my opponent has had his 13 years in office combined. Think about that. That's the momentum we're building. So as far as the block and tackle, doing the voter outreach, our booths are there. Ideli's our campaign manager. Max is one of our organizers. Grace is here. Kyle. Our whole team is here. Kim, we will put you to work. Sept, but Ben, I'm sorry, I don't want to miss anybody. We've got a great team is the point. We will put you to work, but we need the people power to make it happen. And just remember this fundamental thing, that the votes are there. It's gonna be a question of whether we get them to come out and vote or not.